Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis vraiment très heureuse d'être avec vous à l'occasion de cet échange, cet atelier sur les villes intelligentes. Vous savez, cette année, le format de la conférence de Montréal en formule hybride nous démontre bien l'importance de s'adapter. Les villes telles qu'on les connaît, bien, elles sont en pleine métamorphose. Comment tirer des leçons du passé pour faire face aux défis de demain? Voilà une grande question. Il est temps de parler de changement et peut-être même de réorganisation de nos villes. C'est le moment d'implanter des concepts plus centrés sur l'humain pour nos villes, tout en tenant compte des défis environnementaux auxquels nous faisons face. S'il y a bien une chose que la récente crise sanitaire que nous souhaitons tous voir derrière nous, cette crise nous a donc confirmé que, plus que jamais, nous sommes imprégnés d'une vie connectée. Il est notre devoir d'utiliser le momentum présent pour améliorer la qualité de nos milieux de vie et favoriser aussi l'émergence de nouvelles technologies plus vertes, plus éthiques, plus résilientes. Le gouvernement du Québec désire soutenir l'évolution de nos villes intelligentes à travers nos infrastructures, nos transports, notre système de santé et aussi notre vie citoyenne, bien sûr. Parce qu'il faut se le dire, le défi d'une ville plus intelligente, centrée sur l'humain, touche à de nombreuses facettes de la société. Un des principaux aspects sur lesquels nous miserons pour assurer cette transition, ce sont évidemment nos grandes forces en recherche et en innovation. Comme vous le savez, la recherche et l'innovation permettent de nombreuses collaborations entre les nations. Nos universités, dont la réputation n'est plus à faire, nos centres de recherche reconnus, nos regroupements sectoriels dynamiques, multiplient les partenariats, ce qui permet de partager les connaissances, les coûts et les risques, mais aussi de rapprocher la recherche industrielle et publique, de faciliter le transfert des connaissances et aussi de tisser des liens et des alliances stratégiques. L'échange d'idées provenant des différentes parties du monde que nous entendrons aujourd'hui sera d'ailleurs un bel exemple de partage important. S'entraider pour rendre possible l'utilisation des meilleures pratiques pour tous, c'est d'ailleurs un des objectifs de la conférence de Montréal. Nous avons tous intérêt à développer des villes intelligentes et il est temps de poursuivre la conversation. Je conclus donc en vous souhaitant un bon panel, des échanges enrichissants tout au long de ce bel événement. Et sans plus tarder, je cède la parole à M. Damien Silès, qui est directeur général du quartier de l'innovation de Montréal. Monsieur Silès.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Barcelot. Bonjour à tous, présents à Montréal et présents à l'international, avec nos 4 conférenciers qu'on va écouter dans un instant. Très content aujourd'hui d'être parmi vous pour animer cette thématique, comme on le disait tout à l'heure, incorporer des concepts centrés sur l'humain pour une ville intelligente, avec naturellement un regard international. Alors on va essayer de répondre à différentes questions comme comment adapter nos villes aux nouvelles habitudes. Madame Barcelot en parlait justement, nous sommes en pandémie, les habitudes des citoyens changent et comment la ville peut s'adapter. Nous verrons également comment les villes intelligentes doivent être pas uniquement technologiques, mais humaines, s'humaniser justement aux citoyens. Et en dernier lieu, comment adapter nos villes intelligentes résilientes, on entend beaucoup ce mot, aux enjeux sociaux et économiques. Alors, nous aurons 4 conférenciers, 5 minutes 30 par présentation, et nous aurons une période de questions aux alentours de 10 minutes tout de suite après ces 4 présentations. Alors, avant de donner la parole à nos experts, j'aimerais juste vous présenter l'exemple que nous avons à Montréal, que nous dirigeons au quartier d'innovation, qui a été créé en 2013. Et je tiens à dire que Montréal est la première ville universitaire au Canada, 220 000 étudiants. Donc on a une force extraordinaire, comme nous l'entendions tout à l'heure. Et nous avons décidé donc de créer, il y a 3 ans, avec 2 universités, un territoire d'expérimentation de calibre international pour faire des expérimentations urbaines d'ordre technique, social, culturel, je dirais aussi urbaine, c'est naturellement, et en recherche et développement avec nos universités. Alors, la vision que nous avons est simple, on cultive un écosystème dans lequel nous allons travailler avec le public, avec le privé, avec l'académique et pour le citoyen. Et ça, c'est très, très important. L'idée est toujours de voir de quelle manière on peut innover avec le citoyen et pour le citoyen. Donc, on a créé vraiment un terrain de jeu au centre-ville, pas en périphérie de Montréal, mais au centre-ville, avec des gens et qui vivent, qui travaillent, qui étudient. Donc, on a vraiment voulu créer une zone de vie pour installer ce que nous avons appelé LabVie. Le LabVie est un laboratoire à ciel ouvert de la vie intelligente. Et donc, sur 4 km², nous avons créé une infrastructure avec nos partenaires, Vidéotron, qui est une entreprise de télécommunications au Canada, une infrastructure 5G avec un support en Internet des objets, et nous avons testé des projets pilotes. Alors, je vais prendre mes chiffres pour pas me tromper. Depuis 4 ans, nous avons mis 80 projets sur la route. 21 projets sont en cours de réalisation actuellement. Nous avons créé 5 ateliers de co-création participatifs avec les citoyens pour voir quels étaient leurs besoins en santé, en vieillissement de la population, par exemple. Nous avons 7 projets d'infrastructure complétés et nous avons 5 projets en phase de test terrain. Je prendrai peut-être un exemple de projet. Actuellement, nous travaillons avec une fondation qui travaille avec des enfants en difficulté et nous mettons en place et nous testons des miroirs intelligents où nous créons des avatars pour aider les enfants à se brosser les dents, à se peigner, à se laver, etc. Donc, ce sont des exemples qui touchent pas forcément uniquement l'infrastructure, mais vraiment la vie de tous les jours de nos citoyens. Alors, il y a 3 défis, et je m'arrêterai ensuite avec ma présentation. 3 défis pour soutenir le financement. Le premier, ça serait de soutenir, le financement direct des projets que nous faisons, des projets d'expérimentation d'entreprise et des projets de recherche appliquée. Le deuxième aussi serait de tester des solutions technologiques et s'assurer, surtout quand on le fait, d'écouter les citoyens et de pas leur demander par la suite comment ils ont trouvé, mais de les inclure dans le processus. Et le troisième, naturellement, qui semble simple, c'est le défi à l'accès au mobilier urbain pour le développement des villes intelligentes, surtout quand on travaille dans une métropole. Donc voilà en gros ce que nous faisons depuis 4 ans. Nous en sommes très fiers. Nous en sommes d'ailleurs un des seuls au Canada actuellement. Et sans plus attendre, on va passer à nos conférenciers. Et donc la première personne, il s'agit de Monsieur Veis Toprak, qui est directeur général Smart City and Future Strategy, LG SNES, et il nous parle directement de Corée du Sud. Monsieur Neotropak, à vous la parole.
Thank you so much, Damien. Good morning, Montreal. Good morning, Seoul. It's an evening here. So I want to start straightforward with the question, do we really need smart cities? How to design them? How are they going to affect our lifestyles? This is a core question we should discuss about. But before that, I would like to give you some astonishing numbers regarding cities. First of all, my simple answer to this question, do we really need it? Is it a must that we should develop smart cities? We should ponder on smart cities, how to design them, how to develop them. My simple answer will be definitely, absolutely yes. And I believe, I don't know if I should add, unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, absolutely, definitely yes, because it depends to the people. But it is an irreversible, inevitable direction to the smart city. So we have to develop very nice, very smart cities. If you are looking at the numbers, there are some statistics, really astonishing statistics, forecasts. For instance, one is really just a slightly maybe shocking statistics. The forecast says that in 2050, 67% of world's entire population will be living in cities. So that's an incredible number. And there will be, for instance, 37 megacities. And out of 37 megacities, really mega-sized cities, 22 of them will be in Asia. In 2050, 3.5 billion people will be in this corner of the world, maybe in Asia, in Asian continent. And close to 1 billion people will be still suffering from poverty. So every day in Asia, let me give you another statistics from Asia, because I'm living in Korea. I want to give you this perspective. In Asia, every day, 120,000 people are moving to cities. So people are moving to cities, and cities are getting larger and larger. And there's another statistics. For instance, now currently, the cities are occupying only 2% of the planet's surface, but 60% of the energy we are generating are consumed by cities. So you can't escape this fact. So we have to develop smart cities, but in a smart way. So I believe, this is irreversible, and this cannot be changed, this trend. So we have to think about how this will just affect our lifestyle. So should we align our lifestyles to the smart cities, or should we design smart cities according to our lifestyles? That's a question. Let me start with, let's say, widely accepted, widely agreed classical definitions of smart cities. So there are some steps, there are some versions of smart cities. When experts like me, when we are discussing about smart cities, we usually say that there are 3 types of smart cities, 3 versions. The first version, we just call it version Smart City 1.0, and it's infrastructure and high-tech driven smart cities. Back just like in 2001, 2002, so let's say 20 years ago, when smart city industry started, most of the smart cities, those time we didn't call them smart cities. In Korea, they are called, and we as LG was one of the pioneers in smart city business. We just called them ubiquitous cities. So it was all about high tech. It was all about infrastructure. That's why we just call it Smart City 1.0. Smart City 2.0 version was government and city driven, we say, and that started, let's say, approximately 10 years ago, around 2010, but it also evolved to another version, which we call 3.0, Smart City 3.0. That's where civil-centric orientation, public, just co-generation, public contribution, people's citizens' involvement just came into the picture. That's why we just call it Smart City 3.0. And when we are looking at the development phases, again, the issue was first we just concentrated too much on the infrastructure. There are 5 large development phase definitions, and we have to redefine it, particularly during the post-pandemic era. And I would like to just give you more details on that one. But before that, let me say these 5 phases were, the first phase was, again, infrastructure. Simply the government put everything as technology and infrastructure to the basis, to the just fundamental basis of the cities. And I believe that was an error. That was a lesson learned, because in Korea, we had cities that we had a lot of technology there, but people were not moving to those cities. So, and we just started thinking of what was wrong. We just put a lot of technology in it, but it was not working. So we couldn't sort it out. Then the second phase started, and that was a vertical grid phase. I don't want to go into the details. That is followed by a third phase, which was a horizontal grid phase. And after that, the platform came in as the fourth phase. Now these days we just call it fifth phase, but let me talk about fourth phase, development phase. And that was platform phase. Still a lot of cities in Korea, in Singapore, next to us, like in Japan, the cities are based on the platform. And these days we just call it city as a platform, city as a service. So CaaS or COP. So simply the cities are based on platforms. So I believe there are 2 unchangeable core elements of the backbone, which is building the backbone of the smart city developments, the future smart cities, which are coming as the phase 5. And those are data and civil orientation, civic participation. Nobody can change it. And particularly during the pandemic, the need is boosting up. So it is mushrooming. So people are asking for individual services, customized services. Then you need data and the platform. which will serve this just like urge the need. Let me give you another example. The government of Korea poured just into a scheme $133 billion, and this scheme is called Korean New Deal. So it's based on the DNA, we just call it DNA, data, network, and AI. So this DNA already became Korean people's DNA, back to the bone. So nobody can change it. But how we will align our life changes towards this new technology, data-driven, platform-based cities, it's a question mark. Because, again, let me give you another example. As LGCNS, now we are developing 2 cities as government pilot projects in Korea, and each of them are just is more than $2.5 billion. So 2 projects, $5 billion. Next to us in Japan, there is Wawon City. Like I'm looking into Saudi Arabia, for instance. Hopefully, NEOM will become an amazing, just like future city. But the problem is how people will be involved in, particularly during the pandemic. People are too much concerned about this redefinition of the smart cities. So we have to redefine it. Let me give you another example. When we're looking at the just like backbone of the smart cities, there are 2 main layers. You cannot neglect it. So there are 2 main layers. One is consisted of infrastructure and space that is building up, shaping the physical layer. And there's another layer, we just call it digital layer, platform and services. So already everybody agrees during the pandemic that the platform and services should be co-generated by the citizens of the cities. So in Korea, we enjoy it. There is huge contribution, huge involvement of the people into the smart cities. Data is flowing in, and high tech is one of the ways to collect this data, analyze it, and give the people and serve them in a better way. So that is being done now in Korea because we are enjoying 5G now. It's commercially first introduced to the world in Korea by LG. Interesting. And now we're talking about Wi-Fi 6.
Je m'excuse, je vais devoir vous arrêter parce qu'on a 7 minutes par personne. Il faut laisser le temps. Okay. On a des questions par la suite. Vous allez pouvoir y répondre et peut-être continuer. Excusez-moi. Okay. Il faut que je passe au deuxième.
No problem. Okay.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Toprak. On continuera tout à l'heure pendant la période de questions. Je passe à notre second conférencier. Et il nous vient du Québec. Il s'agit de Monsieur Benoît Balmana, qui est directeur général d'IVEO. Donc, vous avez 6 minutes, si c'est possible, si vous voulez avoir des questions tout à l'heure.
Parfait. Merci Damien. Bonjour à tous. Écoutez, pour commencer, je vais être tout à fait d'accord avec Monsieur Toprak que les villes, pour moi, sont devenues essentielles là, pour adresser tous les enjeux sociaux, environnementaux, économiques qu'on connaît. C'est devenu des gouvernements de proximité essentiels pour agir sur leur territoire. Donc, les villes aujourd'hui sont vraiment au centre là des stratégies d'innovation et ça, j'en suis pleinement convaincu. Par contre, ce constat m'amène à penser que si les villes sont essentielles, il faut inclure toutes les villes. Et souvent, dans le concept de Smart City, je me rends compte qu'on parle beaucoup des grandes villes, des grandes métropoles. Mais si je prends par exemple au Québec, je voudrais juste rappeler quelques statistiques. On a 1100 villes au Québec et seulement 10 ont plus de 100 000 habitants. Donc, pour moi, si on parle de villes résilientes et de villes intelligentes, c'est important que ces concepts s'appliquent à l'ensemble des municipalités et soient pas juste réservés aux grandes métropoles. Et donc, de ce fait, il faut absolument que les technologies, les nouvelles innovations soient capables de s'adapter dans les différents contextes des municipalités. Et donc, forcément, que l'humain va être au centre du système parce que chaque ville va avoir peut-être des enjeux et des contextes différents qu'il va falloir adresser. Au niveau de Damien, vous parliez tout à l'heure l'importance du terme de la résilience des villes. Je pense en effet que l'innovation et les technologies vont aider cette résilience en permettant simplement aux villes de pouvoir rendre le maximum de services à ses citoyens. On l'a vu avec la pandémie, la mobilité, les gens ont besoin d'avoir accès aux services plus localement. Et donc, pour accélérer cette résilience, il va falloir développer des nouvelles façons de faire et la technologie et l'innovation va pouvoir aider à cette résilience. Et pour moi, l'intelligence, on parle toujours du mot smart dans les villes, Je pense que c'est l'intelligence, il faut le voir comme une possibilité pour les villes d'être beaucoup plus efficaces dans leur manière de gérer les ressources humaines, de gérer leurs finances. On sait que les villes ont des enjeux de financement importants. L'innovation et la technologie doit permettre d'être beaucoup plus efficaces et d'avoir une meilleure façon de gérer leurs opérations et aussi une meilleure façon de gérer tous les enjeux environnementaux. Donc l'innovation, pour moi, est clairement au service des municipalités et donc les technologies qui sont développées doivent aider les villes et aider les citoyens. Et donc de ce fait, en effet, le côté humain est essentiel, il est central parce que l'innovation, c'est un moyen de rendre des services, d'être plus efficace et ce n'est pas une finalité. Et donc, vous en parliez tout à l'heure, Damien, dans ce que vous faites au quartier de l'innovation sur l'expérimentation, puis c'est une approche qu'on a aussi chez IVEO, où l'expérimentation permet en effet de tester les performances technologiques, mais elle permet surtout de tester l'acceptabilité sociale des nouvelles technologies. Et cette acceptabilité sociale, elle est fondamentale. Et donc, l'humain est fondamental parce que sans acceptation sociale de l'innovation, il n'y aura pas d'innovation, d'accord. Donc, je pense que les concepts de tests en milieu réel, les contextes d'expérimentation, d'innovation sont des moyens importants pour aider les villes à atteindre ce concept de smart city. Et le dernier point important, à mon avis, que les villes aussi doivent avoir pour accélérer ce déploiement, c'est le transfert de connaissances. Il faut que les villes partagent leurs projets, partagent leurs bons coups, partagent parfois leurs erreurs pour que les villes s'inspirent mutuellement. Et si on veut que les villes s'inspirent mutuellement, comme je disais, il faut que l'innovation qui est développée puisse s'adapter dans plusieurs tailles de municipalités. Donc, Montréal peut peut-être inspirer d'autres grandes métropoles, mais il ne faut pas oublier que peut-être une petite ville de région va pas du tout avoir les mêmes contextes, les mêmes infrastructures, et donc peut-être aura du mal à s'inspirer de projets qui sont faits dans les grandes villes. Et donc j'encourage aussi les petites municipalités à partager entre elles leurs projets, leur vécu, pour que ensemble elles puissent accélérer le déploiement du concept de Smart City, qui, comme je le disais en introduction, doit s'étendre à l'ensemble des municipalités pour qu'on crée réellement un impact environnemental et social, non pas juste sur le territoire, mais aussi à très grande échelle.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Balman. Pardon. Donc, nous passons maintenant à notre troisième conférencier en direct de Singapour. Il s'agit de Monsieur Hugues Lim, qui est General Director, Center of Livable Cities, Ministry of National Development. Monsieur Lim, à vous la parole.
Thank you very much. Bonjour to you in Montreal and good evening from Singapore. It's a great pleasure for me to join you here and to share a little bit about our experience in Singapore with smart cities. I would like to begin by just outlining that over the past 5 decades, Singapore has consistently invested in technology as an integral part of how we address urban challenges. So this began with a national computerization plan in the 1980s and has evolved to a Smart Nation vision, which was launched in 2014. The Smart Nation vision aims to transform Singapore into a leading economy powered by digital innovation and a world-class, smart and sustainable city. The key components of the vision comprise digital economy, digital government, and digital society. Now, for us, we recognize that a smart city is not merely about having the most sophisticated technologies. It has to be one where technology is appropriately harnessed to enable digitally integrated planning and responsive urban governance to improve the quality of the daily lives of our residents and to enable businesses to be more dynamic, able to recognize opportunities, as well as meeting their customers' needs and efficient in the use of resources and facing less bureaucracy. This is critical given the evolving needs and the higher expectations of digitally savvy businesses and citizens. At the same time, the smart city framework must suit the city's development context and goals. This may mean making best use of information already available for the best purpose and not necessarily starting with technology. But where there's already an abundance of data, and this is very much the case with the advent of digital and mobile technologies, an appropriate investment in technology, whether platforms or applications, and the skills to harness it may yield great dividends for the city and its residents. So as opportunities for digitalization grow, especially in municipal services and systems, we have to work on growing acceptance and the capacity to be a smart city. Else there are risks that some segments of society, whether businesses or individuals, may get left behind in the process. Even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, whilst we were introducing many new digital services, we had to make sure that these digitally vulnerable groups were not left out. So there was almost always a small analog to the digital. And as cities continue to grow and develop their digital offerings, the digital divide can only become more pronounced if it's not recognized and addressed. So in 2018, Singapore released a digital government blueprint to accelerate the transformation of the civil service and the delivery of e-government services to our people. For us, the digital government blueprint was about becoming digital to the core, not just about digitalizing individual parts of the service. And that meant making use of data, connectivity, and computerization in an impactful manner to transform the core functions of the public service. The aim is to deliver easy to use, seamless, secure, and reliable government services to our people. At the same time, digital literacy is very important because residents need to have the know-how before they can embrace such technology in their lives. Singapore has been initiating efforts to be digitally inclusive and ensure no segments of the population are left behind. Our Infocom Media Development Authority set up the SG Digital Office in May 2020. This was in the midst of the COVID-19 circuit breaker in Singapore. And it was meant to accelerate the adoption of digital tools and raise the digital literacy of less technically savvy individuals and businesses. For a start, the digital office recruited 1,000 digital ambassadors to help senior citizens and hawkers, which are basically street vendors, under two programs, the Seniors Go Digital and the Hawkers Go Digital programs. The Seniors Go Digital program was launched to promote digital literacy amongst the elderly through one-on-one coaching, small group learning, and online classes. And Singapore is setting up over 50 physical learning hubs across the island for senior citizens to receive Infocom training on topics such as setting up good passwords, using e-payments, making video calls, and searching for information online, as well as guidance how to protect yourself from online scams. The Hawkers Go Digital program was initiated in June 2020 to encourage the hawkers, the street food vendors, to be able to encourage the adoption of a unified e-payment solution. Previously, the tendency was just to use cash for their transaction. So we deployed digital ambassadors to socialize e-payment solutions to hawkers and encourage them to embrace digital transactions. When introducing such new smart systems, it helps to be able to pilot at scale and learn from the process. As Benoit shared, I think it's very important to be able to learn from what we're doing, to learn from mistakes, and to gain confidence in the process. Within a city, this requires, of course, the government and technology developers to embrace a very agile mindset and an experimental approach. This test and learn approach at smaller scale will encourage innovation to confirm the effectiveness of technology before applying it at a large scale. Let me share one example. Tengah is an upcoming public housing estate under the charge of the Housing Development Board and would be Singapore's first smart and sustainable town. Among some of the key sustainability features of Tengah is the provision of a centralized cooling system for residential blocks, which could provide highly energy-efficient cooling to homes. But in order to address the concerns by the developers as well as the residents over excessive usage or charging, the company providing it had to develop an app to allow residents to monitor their energy consumption, receive alert notifications if the unit needs maintenance, and to track the consumption data of the unit over time. So a strong public, private, and people partnership is very important to facilitate the effective delivery of smart services to the city's residents in an efficient, inclusive, and safe manner. But it's also important for us to have clear rules and transparency in the use of data in order to build this trust. Without this, a reluctance to use new digital services because of a distrust in the use of personal data can impede the city from enjoying the wider benefits of smart services. To sum up, technology gives us many new possibilities for raising our game in realizing this concept of city as a service. But for technology to be in service of a city's residents, people have to be at the core of its design and development, and there are opportunities for public, private, and people partnerships to bring this about more effectively. At the same time, a city's leaders must pay attention to digital literacy so that no disadvantaged residents are left behind in the process. And finally, to achieve a smart city, there has to be clear and consistent rules on data privacy and data use to build the necessary trust amongst a city's residents. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lim. Nous passons à notre dernière invitée qui provient des États-Unis. Il s'agit de Madame Jana Rims, qui est associée chez McKinsey Global Institute. Madame Rims, à vous la parole.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to talk about one of my favorite topics. And we at the McKinsey Global Institute have studied smart cities for a long time, and our focus has always been on what can digital tools do to make citizens' lives better. How can they save time? How can they be healthier? How can they be safer? How can they have a cleaner, more sustainable environment? However, I have loved hearing from all of my colleagues on that front. But so let me take a slightly different slant and focus on the moment we are at, which is the COVID situation. I very much liked the comment that Arundhati Roy said last year, which was, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. And no place is this more true than in cities, because the last year has dramatically changed lives of everyone in just about every city in the world. Clearly, the experiences have varied, but whether you are a household that suddenly worked digitally from home, had children working from home, or had to find ways to, for example, get purchases done digitally, had to cancel holidays, had to start thinking about their lives in a very different way. Whether we were a business trying to keep consumers, their customers and your workers safe, and having to suddenly start serving your environment in a different manner, finding digital ways to deliver your goods and services, for example. Or whether you were a city government, where suddenly you had a real emergent need to take care of not just people's livelihoods and the economic prosperity, but their lives too. And in many cases, that changed how cities operated. From the past silos of people being independent with one another, they had to work together, almost like a war room, to solve whatever was the problem of the day. And it also came to the forefront, the need for digital tools, because cities that were digital, I think Singapore being one of, definitely among the top leaders, if not the top leader in this front, digitally prepared cities were in an easier situation to adjust than others. So now what we do, in a way, it is a moment of pause. We have a moment to imagine cities again. And I think many cities already around the globe have taken advantage of this moment. They knew, for example, that we would have less traffic in the city. So you could change the kinds of traffic organizations that they had wanted to do for a long time, but because of the transition costs, they were harder. So whether it's Milan with their Strade Aperte approach, where they reduced the number of lanes to provide more room for bicycles and walkers, or whether it was cities that invested in green spaces to allow like Malmö, where you really wanted to get people out. Other cities have thought of the COVID as an opportunity to advance their strategies for a longer term, because of the fact that many cities had access to stimulus funding. And in some cases, that has been, for example, in Barcelona, investment on the small and medium-sized businesses, which were some of the hardest hit. So I think these are just a few examples, and we can go more into other examples around the globe. And clearly the experiences have been different in cities where the pandemic was controlled faster and earlier, especially in some parts of Asia than they were in the US or Western Europe, for example. But we still are at the moment of thinking about how are we going to make our cities different going forward. And if there's a silver lining in such a horrendous humanitarian crisis like the pandemic, it is that most people have reflected their lives differently. On average, we have seen people sleep longer because their commutes are shorter. They have spent more time with their children. There really is a new appreciation of the human-centric approach to cities. And I truly hope we'll take advantage of that and make sure the cities, the companies, and the technology will work together to make our cities even better for everyone to live on. And I would like to finish just with the same tone that Hugh, you set up with the inclusiveness, because of the fact that this was also a crisis that was extremely unequal. Some people maintained their income, stayed at home, and weren't able to spend. So many households had a lot more money to spend than they had before. Household savings in most countries grew from 50 to 100% on what they had been in 2019, for example. So basically people had more money, but then there were others who were very hard hit by the pandemic and the health impact, as well as the economic hit that hit particularly service workers harder. So we need to make sure that we do not just serve those who were fortunate to be sheltered from some of the economic impacts, but really bring everyone along. So thank you. Merci. I look forward to the conversation.
Merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. On va passer maintenant, si vous le voulez bien, à la période de questions. Je vais essayer de poser, il nous reste 10 minutes, une question à chacun, peut-être 1 minute 30, 2 minutes de réponse. Si vous voulez bien respecter le temps, ça c'est très, très apprécié. Donc, première question pour Monsieur Neo Tropak. On parlait en direct de Corée. Quelles leçons pourriez-vous nous partager de l'expérience coréenne avec les villes intelligentes par rapport à l'auditoire et aux gens qui nous écoutent?
We enjoy high technology here. Every aspect, in every corner of the life, we are using. If you ask the road to an 80-year-old grandmother here, she's going to show you just her smartphone, and she's going to show you all the buses, like how much you have to wait for the bus and where you will take it, like approximately how long it's going to take. But I believe just like Korea is enjoying a lot of different services utilized and customized to the citizens, particularly in Seoul, one of the best examples of smart city. Everything is so much digitalized, so you have no questions about your commuting, your just like questions. They are instantly answered through systems provided by the municipality or by the smart city stakeholders. But the question is, are you just like comfortable with those? I'm not sure, because now we are going back to the basic principles. We have to redefine the space, for instance, in Seoul. So we have to think how we can merge spaces with offices, with accommodation, so people need less time to commute. So that's a better solution than smart mobility. So you can introduce a lot of like traffic solutions like we do in Seoul, but the core problem is there. So I believe that now Korean technology, Korean stakeholders, smart city stakeholders are looking deep into the main core questions of smart cities, core issues. And that should be done in every corner of the world, I believe, particularly during the pandemic, because people don't want to just go out, don't want to just like talk to people. They want everything online, untagged, no contact. So we have to address those questions, particularly like in this era.
Merci. Deuxième question pour Monsieur Balmana, pardon. On parlait des villes, autant les métropoles que des petites villes. Comment, selon vous, la mobilité durable contribue-t-elle à la résilience des villes, en sachant que les paradigmes depuis la Covid ont complètement changé pour les utilisateurs?
Oui, ben c'est sûr que au Québec, on vise beaucoup sur la mobilité durable. Premièrement, parce que c'est le plus gros émetteur de gaz à effet de serre, en tout cas chez nous. Donc, si on veut lutter contre les changements climatiques, ben la mobilité ou le transport est devenu essentiel à transformer pour réduire ces émissions de gaz à effet de serre. La pandémie a amené en effet des drôles d'enjeux sur la mobilité. On a vu le transport collectif s'effondrer. Jenna parlait tout à l'heure que les gens ont travaillé de la maison, donc ça a intrinsèquement évité beaucoup de déplacements des citoyens. Mais on a vu par contre apparaître beaucoup les enjeux de livraison urbaine. Les gens ont commandé beaucoup leurs biens sur Internet avec des livraisons, et ça a amené dans les villes des enjeux particuliers d'avoir beaucoup de camions qui se sont mis à circuler dans toutes les rues pour les livraisons. Et la mobilité durable, ben, c'est aussi de travailler sur ces enjeux, par exemple de livraison urbaine. À Montréal, vous savez, Damien, on a travaillé beaucoup sur les projets de livraison décarbonée, donc les livraisons plus vertes avec des vélos cargo. Puis donc de voir que la mobilité, c'est pas juste la mobilité, pardon, des citoyens, mais c'est aussi la mobilité des marchandises. Et dans cette période de pandémie, la livraison est devenue quand même un enjeu important, et c'est donc essentiel là de trouver aussi des nouvelles solutions et des innovations pour rendre ces livraisons urbaines plus vertes et plus efficaces, et éviter qu'on se retrouve submergé par des milliers de camions qui tournent dans les rues, ce qui n'est pas bon bien sûr pour l'environnement, mais aussi pour la sécurité des gens.
Parfait, merci beaucoup. Prochaine question pour Monsieur Lim. Monsieur Lim, comment pouvez-vous pouvons-nous assurer de manière concrète que les enjeux d'accessibilité, d'équité et d'écologie figurent à la tête de nos efforts pour développer nos villes intelligentes?
Thank you very much for the question. In fact, this is something I think for the public service is something front and center of our consideration. When we look at serving all our constituents, whether in business or residents in the city, it's important to take stock of who is there and to check on how well subscribed they are to our services. I'll give you an example. Last year, in the midst of the pandemic, I was heading the Building and Construction Authority at that time, and we needed to be able to get the message out, how to adopt safe management measures amongst all the construction businesses in the sector. And many of them were not necessarily hooked up to us digitally, but we had the means to communicate if they plugged in to the system. So we had to work quite closely to make sure the platform was there to connect, but also to work with our associations and with businesses to spread the word. To spread the word, that if you wanted to know the latest, this is where you need to connect to. And so we use a platform like Telegram just to communicate out to as many people as possible. And, by knowing, firstly, how many businesses out there and how many were subscribed, we're able to know whether there's a gap. And in fact, after several weeks, we knew that there was something missing because a certain group had not come in, had not registered for safe practice. So we basically put out to them, look, if you have some hesitancy in using the digital service, we'll set up a clinic and we'll put up 2 very central places where you can come in for a consult. And basically we had ambassadors down there to help small business owners to navigate what they needed to. And many times it was not the use of the digital tool that was the issue. They were more concerned that when they use the digital tool, they have to make submissions and declarations, and they were worried that they get it wrong and that the authority would take a dim view of what they did. So it was also to provide the human touch to assure them that actually they could master the services that were being provided. And, that's something that I think was certainly very, very instructive for all my colleagues in rolling out that delivery of service in the middle of a pandemic. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Dernière question pour Madame Rims. Madame Rims, selon vous, quelles sont les plus grandes menaces à la qualité de vie des humains vivant dans les villes intelligentes?
That's an excellent question. And actually, continuing very much on the theme you were talking with Benoit already, when you look at people's welfare, their wellness standards, when they respond to question on how well do you feel, we tend to adjust to many inconveniences in life. We can just adjust to them. There are two things that often come at the top of what are the things that you really don't adjust to, that really make you unhappy every day. And first one is commute, how far you need to go every day, because it feels like it is not only time wasted, it is risky and it's stressful. So it is probably not just makes you not feel good, but it's also bad for your health, bad for your social interactions, etc. The second one is noise. And both of these are topics that actually smart cities can do a lot about. So, for example, just to give a very tangible example of some of the initiatives that people are thinking about is the 15-minute city, perhaps best known from Paris, which is thinking about people should have access to all the needs they have within the 15-minute radius from their home, whether it's work, shops, healthcare, schools, etc. And I think it is, if you do that, you actually don't have a limit of the size of the city. Look at Tokyo. It is the world's largest city, almost by 100%. I mean, there are so many more people, 30 million, than the next largest city. Yet it is very much built on communities where the commute times are not as long, and you also have an excellent public transit system. So yes, you can do that. You can live in a very large city and be able to walk and avoid the commute. And similarly for noise, I think there's a lot you can do. And I think particularly, I'm thinking about the example of trucks, transit. Transit choices make a very large difference for that. And I think, so in a way, your question of what are the biggest challenges, I would very much look at what your people complain about. What is it that makes people in your city unhappy? So, for example, when we did our Smart Cities report a few years back, which is freely available on the web, we looked at 50 cities around the globe and assessed how they were doing on their performance. But in addition to that, we surveyed 400 people in each city and asked them about what they use, how happy they are with it. And we asked them to tell us what would be the digital tool that they would most like to see. And it was surprising in how many times there was something that the city officials weren't necessarily aware. It could be simple things like we can make healthcare appointments online, but we can't do dentist appointments online. For example, that is in a city where the public sector provides those services. In other places, it is we have the transit information on when the bus is coming or when the metro is coming. They are broken too often. There are small things that, as long as you listen to your citizens, they will tell you what's making them unhappy. And every city is different. Every city has their own DNA and thrives in a different way. So you need to know what is making your citizens unhappy and focus solving that issue.
Merci beaucoup, merci Madame Reams, merci Monsieur Neo Toprak, merci Monsieur Lim, merci Monsieur Balamana de vos explications. Je pense qu'on en sait un peu plus. On espère qu'après cette pandémie, on va avoir des villes intelligentes encore plus humaines. Donc merci encore beaucoup de votre participation ce matin. Je vous invite à continuer à écouter donc le forum et les conférences qui s'en viennent. Et je vous souhaite naturellement une excellente journée et une bonne soirée pour les gens qui sont en Asie. Merci beaucoup.